I must welcome the Right Worshipful the Mayor of Bath and her consort, Councillor Cherry Bleath. So, Lady Mayor, ladies and gentlemen, it may not have escaped your attention that this is not a run-of-the-mill lecture. I try to turn everything I see into a work of art, and the fire alarm instructions have not escaped my attention. When the alarm soundeth, gather up thyselves in a seemly manner, and assemble in a place of safety on the corner of the highway. Tarry not to gather thy livings, but in all good humour and in faith trusteth in the Lord for thy salvation. Thine jointress and thy family will mourn thy loss, so take the path of sensibility and proceed with care and consideration for thy fellow men. Now, you'll never hear fire instructions like that again, so why don't we do it, you know? This is quite hard work because for the first time I've done a forensic examination into what I perceive to be the decline of the art of conversation. So we have to dig deep. I'll try to make a few jokes, but it's quite difficult. Because there's so much substance, I've just had a little book printed, which you may care to have at the end. I found the way of getting someone to arrive is to start, so I'll start. How did this particular venture start? The turning point took place on Sunday the 13th of April this year during a visit to a garden in the National Garden Scheme, Coley Court, some of you know that, in East Hartree. I saw a notice saying, grist was sent to the mill. See? I asked an adjacent group of people what grist meant in this context. One lady looked up at me, mobile phone in hand, and said apologetically, I've lost my signal. I was actually hoping to hear the response from the memory of a human being. Instead, it was someone who relied more on the cloud than trying to figure it out for themselves. That did it. Having founded large network organizations in the past, I decided that the experience I had, in this case in promoting conversation, should not go to waste. Here was a worthwhile project if ever there was one. So, tempted once again to climb mountains, off I went. The origin of the word conversation. I wonder if we have moved ahead in our understanding of conversation since the time of Socrates, a man who never took a fee for anything and who felt nearest to the crowd in that he had the fewest wants. He was a philosopher who said, the only true wisdom is knowing you know nothing. And I cannot teach anybody anything, I can only make them think, not the talk we hear today. The word conversation comes from the 14th century root, living together, having dealings with others, also, manner of conducting oneself in the world. The overall implication is that points of view can be changed, that people can be transformed and converted through an active process. A conversation can be defined as where two or three more contrasting points of view are brought together to bring about something new, with an implication of community content, whether living together or working together professionally or privately. Now there's a mouthful. What are the features and benefits of conversation? A few quotes. Conversation between Adam and Eve must have been difficult at times because they had nobody to talk about. William Shakespeare. Conversation should be pleasant without scurrility, witty without affectation, free without indecency, learned without conceit, and novel without falsehood. And finally, Socrates himself, let no day pass without discussing goodness and all the other subjects about which you hear me talking and examining both in myself and others. It really is the very best thing that a man can do, and that life without this sort of examination is not worth living. The brain. Our brain consists of the most powerful relational database on the planet. That includes computers. At a research institute in Japan, where resides the fourth fastest supercomputer in the world, researchers were not able to simulate the brain's activity in real time. It took 40 minutes, 40, with a combined muscle of over 80,000 processors to achieve the equivalent of 1 second of biological brain processing time. Information retention and problem solving is an activity that the brain loves to do, as retrievers love to retrieve. As it would be cruel to lock up such an animal in a cage, so we can inflict punishment on ourselves by giving insufficient respect to our brain. We are only aware of a minute fraction of our actual knowledge, and one of the best ways of drawing out the knowledge is being asked a question, or simply sharing what we have. Here is a riddle. If we were to give away every bit of conscious knowledge we had, why would we find that at the end we knew more than when we started? It should be fairly obvious, hopefully. For the brain to function correctly, we must give it the right conditions, including authentic data. It can do little with small talk or baseless material and promptly disengages. Theodore Zeldin, how many of you have heard of him? Theodore Zeldin, the Oxford academic commented, although the brain is capable of making connections, many are never made, and messages, feelings, visions, and thoughts never register. They simply bump blindly into each other without any result. I think it's beautiful. The mind, if left to its own devices, will follow well-established and familiar patterns. That is why history is so full of opportunities gone unnoticed, and why so many thoughts and feelings are rendered sterile, like sperm and eggs that never meet. Zeldin, author of the book An Intimate History of Humanity, created a charity called The Muse that organized conversational dinners in restaurants, or the Feast of Strangers as it was christened. A participant wrote, "We've been amazed by how quickly the conversations become animated and how interesting and memorable the event becomes. You get to know a stranger very well and find that you learn a lot about yourself too in discussing such topics as ambition, curiosity, fear, etc." One eminent participant said he would never again give a dinner party without this Muse formula because he hated superficial chat. Another said he had in just 2 hours made a friend who was closer than many he had known much longer. A third said he had never revealed so much about himself to anybody except his wife. I say self-revelation is the foundation on which mutual trust is built. I am a therapist, among other things. I have noticed that conversation can act as a mental and emotional stabilizer. Conversation can automatically flag up problems to us before they become troublesome. Without minimal conversation, it's very easy to lose your way and become isolated. We may look down on a homeless person muttering to themselves on the street, but there for the grace of God go us. I did work for the homeless a bit in London and went round with a worker, and she pointed to someone really quite out of it, and she said, "You wouldn't think he'd been a merchant banker, would you?" It can happen to absolutely anybody. Not only can conversation inform us, but we can become exhilarated with the activation of feel-good chemicals supplied courtesy of our own body. That's the body's way of encouraging us to be active and positive. There is no more elegant way of reminding ourselves of our uniqueness and our creativity, and it comes free of charge. In my work over the years with individuals and couples, it's amazing how much loneliness is caused by not feeling understood. Is not depression just creativity on its head? The most counterproductive thing we can do is to obsess about the problem itself. Instead, find a fresh topic on something else entirely. After a lively discussion, and unbeknown to you, the activated software, if you will, goes global in the brain, eagerly looking for another topic to attend to, irrespective of theme. You return to your problem at home to find that mysteriously the situation is more manageable. What happened? You allowed the brain to do what it does best. We do not have to understand the processes of the brain, just provide the right conditions. Why then, with so many massive advantages, is the amount and quality of conversation in today's society so lamentably in deficit? It behoves us for our future, if not the present, to look at some of the reasons why this might be the case. Seat belts on at this point. Influences that we are not aware of, because we're not aware of them, can affect us profoundly without our conscious awareness. The reason for this rather grim section to follow is to inoculate your mind. In other words, to alert you to counterproductive influences in order that you can be aware of them and counteract them. That's the reason for adopting the logo of Gulliver, that he was tied down by a lot of little strings. In preparation for this talk, I did actually speak to Theodore Zeldin in his rooms in Oxford. He said to me that measures to make people feel good are not enough. It is necessary to understand the source of the problem. So here are my top 10 or bottom 10 for the sources of programming. Englishness. We're a funny lot. We would be quite glad to help someone out, but when it comes to asking for help ourselves, we give a million excuses. I don't want to trouble people. They have enough problems of their own. Perhaps it's just me. People will not understand my problem if I try to tell it. I'm probably one of the few that has this problem. If I describe my problems to people, they will reject me and laugh at me. My problem must have been due to having failed at some point, so I'm not worthy to be helped. I am not worthy. Brits don't seem to have a protocol for asking for help and end up at the doctor's surgery demanding antidepressants or perhaps simply a large G&T. Not from the doctor. Another wretched entrail is the excuse me sorry syndrome. This trigger is activated when you move near someone in a supermarket or cross their path or even ask a question. It comes perilously close to apologizing for our own existence. A third aspect of Englishness is excessive modesty. A world expert on a matter will describe his knowledge as not too bad, or knows one or two things. It would be simply bad form to say, I'm good. And yet how are we to know someone's value if they do not tell us? Possibly the best way of doing this is to say, I've had a good few years of experience, maybe I can help. The fourth and most infamous aspect is the famous English stiff upper lip. We seldom betray anything of the feeling we might be experiencing. The flaunting of ourselves and wearing our heart on our sleeve is the same, just a more deceptive version. So bite the bullet, keep your chin up. It's become symbolic of the British, and particularly of the products of the English public school from the age of the British Empire, to play up and play the game. That do your duty and show emotion attitude was expressed in Alfred Lord Tennyson's The Charge of the Light Brigade. Theirs not to make reply, theirs not to reason why, theirs but to do and die. Into the valley of death rode the 600. So I ask, are we English fated by our standoffishness? Sociological causes, the family. I was once on a cruise to the Lebanon. On the ship there were a large group of boys aged between 12 and 14. They were sitting round a dinner table, unsupervised, perfectly behaved, and conversing meaningfully. In busy Western society, the family unit meets less often around the table at home, if at all. This is an occasion where people can update each other on the day. How can children learn conversational skills? You cannot learn social skills sitting in your bedroom, eating McDonald's and playing video games. If that sounds like a rant, it is. I do rant from time to time. It's all right. Lack of trust, which, believe it or not, goes with the above. Because if you come from a trusting family, see, that tends to move out. This lack of ability is related to a lack of drive to get to trust other people, a skill that I fear we're losing. We all like to think we are trusting souls, but when push comes to shove, we hesitate, make our excuses and leave. Once our trust has broken in one aspect of our lives, for example with a divorce of an unfaithful partner, it can spread like a virus to other aspects of our lives, and we end up not trusting anything or anyone. And you don't notice it. That's what viruses do. Some of us notice the evolution of what I call an automatic person. There is no thinking as such, but reaction. We revert to robotic or dissociated speaking. Have a nice day. Have a good weekend. Someone said to me that on Monday, if I recall. Have a good weekend on Monday? Have a good one. I'm not too bad, thank you. In other words, not terminally ill. Awesome. I'm like, oh. And the dreaded no problem. I order a coffee, and the person says no problem. And I want to say, look, this is a coffee bar. I didn't really expect a problem. You know, did I cause some anxiety when I came in? Or we were discussing you, and we thought, could be a problem, but no, sir, we will serve you. You know, what does it mean, no problem? So we're using more and more words that mean less and less. This is not a great start for in-depth communication. 3, loss of contact with nature. Françoise and myself visited Chalice Well in Glastonbury yesterday to celebrate the autumn equinox. We gave thanks to Mother Nature. And I realized how I had become separated from it through just doing things every day and being in the house and so on. You don't have to be an animist to believe that nature is a living thing. Nature's way of maintaining itself is far more elegant than the ways that we have chosen. Nature does not steal. It works in cooperation with the universe. Why not link in with it for a bit? The best way of relaxing is to notice the detail, to listen to the song of the birds, to study light and shade, to feel the trees. We could say communing with nature. Nature has an enormous ability to heal. Nature has its own consciousness and its own intelligence. It is by no slip of the tongue that we describe situations or people as being natural or unnatural. We are, after all, part of nature, not the other way around. And if we could stop regarding ourselves as superior, we would save a lot of problems. Another rant. Nature has no side effects. Nature was here long before humankind, and it will be there, I say, sad to say, longer after we leave. Visit St. Francis of Assisi for a dynamic view of nature. Talking briefly of animals, how many of us even approach the unconditional love of animals, elephants and dolphins in particular? On the home front, dogs are a wonderful example. Will we ever reach their standards of love? Husbands who are having problems with getting the attention they need from a doting dog lover wife should be careful before saying it's either the dog or me. Structural changes in society. Does get a bit heavy from now on. It's the way it is. When the industrial era began, it broke the connection between the individual and the community. This resulted in cultural isolation and alienation because people moved off the land from the countries into big cities and were treated as units of production. The main criteria is the shaving of every last penny of costs. If we can save 20% by having a call center in India, then for the sake of profit, it is justifiable. And many offices remind me of human battery cages, where the individual is dehumanized and depersonalized. Any situation where workers feel like robots, disempowered, monitored, and their every step tracked by GPS, as in Amazon fulfillment workhouses, is a confirmation that they are merely creatures in a treadmill. This brainwashing takes place on a daily basis. What incentive, therefore, is there to converse? This is diametrically opposed to the alchemist who works in his laboratory. Labore, oratore. Environmental noise. Oh, the dreadful background music. I have lost count of the number of publicans I've asked to turn down the volume. Says I, it's supposed to be background music, not foreground music. In terms of general discourse and conversation, high ambient noise levels make it more difficult to converse because the brain has to be on the alert for possible dangers, and the more different types of background noise there are, the more the reptile brain has to use part of its processing power for danger detection. Can you really concentrate fully on someone's conversation in a noisy pub? In general, I do wonder if the city is the natural place for a human being to thrive. I merely offer that to you. Social media. I would rather call it asocial media. It enables the illusion of having friends without the actual substance. We may have 1,000 likes, and we may have accumulated 435 friends, but if we've never met more than a handful of them face to face, what is the significance in that? As for contented messages, what is the point in recycling trivia? Though, of course, facts are always useful. The higher brain will not be able to respond to something that doesn't ring true with its experience. In effect, it goes on strike. It is so easy to predicate our need for self-worth by pandering to win followers, likes, and viewings. Futile. Social media has become the métier of choice for many people who could, in other circumstances, channel that energy into books, music, or art. We see youngsters walking along the street listening to their iPods, oblivious to their surroundings. You could say cut off. As for messaging and so on, twittering, etc., the brain is being reprogrammed to get emotional response out of what appears on a screen. And if that's happened for 6 years in your life, very difficult to reverse it. Violent games must affect the ability to empathize and rewire the brain towards a more inhuman environment. The futuristic hit game called Destiny allows players to save humanity by basically killing everything. The company thought it worthwhile investing $500 million, but it is hardly calculated to increase community mindedness. However, the internet is not all bad. How else can you talk to and see your grandchildren in Australia at the click of a mouse? We can order, check our bank accounts, do our own research, and seek out minority views via alternative media. Emails may even encourage shy people to utter sentiments they could not say in words. Without the internet, I could not have organized this. Let us not use the internet as a scapegoat. You can't blame a hammer for a damaged thumb. The Frankfurt School. Who's heard of the Frankfurt School? Anyone? The movement became active in the 1920s in Germany. I'm going to skip a bit of this, technical stuff. In 1923, Felix Wheel, a German Marxist, co-founded an organization called the Institute of Marxism. But in order to hide its roots, it became known as the Institute of Social Research, later to become known simply as the Frankfurt School. It opened in 1924. This Marxist group sought to collapse Western society from the inside. This included, this may sound familiar to you, introducing sex education and awareness prematurely, destroying traditional culture, including the family itself, and of course, destroying religion. Anyone defending traditional culture would be called a fascist and a suitable candidate for sensitivity training. An aspect of this was political correctness. The method was to change speech and thought patterns by spreading the idea that vocalizing your beliefs is disrespectful to others and must be avoided. 2, using this to stifle any discussion or actions which might show up the lack of common sense in the notions. 3, call it something that sounds positive, such as political correctness. So we can't say black coffee, you know the rest. We have to coffee without milk. It's all over the place. And we must be careful about real or imagined personal slights of other people, calling someone black. No evidence, of course. Who needs it? The main target of such propaganda now are the local authorities. We have the recent example of the 1,400 children in Rotherham. Most of the guilty ones were Pakistanis. And this doesn't let the authorities off the hook, but they thought that to press them might lead to accusations of racial discrimination. The increasingly compliant BBC, or Dumbed Down Central as I call them, doesn't allow the use of the appellation Miss in case it gives offence. There is now a trend in schools not to have winners of races in case others are psychologically traumatized. We must remove Bibles because they might offend people of other faiths who have never complained, but they might. When people complain that this or that is political correctness gone mad, they're wrong. It was mad in the first place. So when you want to say something critical and you find yourself biting your tongue, that is possibly the effect of embedded PC in here. The Marxist campaign has been a spectacular success. Regarding conversation, how many times have I heard people saying, "Why didn't you tell me before?" To which the answer is, "I didn't want to upset your feelings." One of the causes of lack of confidence is lack of candid and loving feedback. Feedback is the biggest favor you can do to anyone, whether at work or at home. The English artist Winifred Nicholson became friends with Li Yanqie, a Chinese artist. She wrote, "I adore criticism. I am very grateful for it. I get all too little up here." Scotland. "The only person who gives it to me is my friend Lee." Hence the attack on this by the political correct movement, now based in California, by the way, who want to keep people in a state of nervous tension. There should be a warning label. If it's PC, it's a community-destroying virus. So do the opposite, and you will be on the right track. Whenever, personal testimony here, whenever I go out, I always totally ignore PC. I will talk to anyone with a pulse. And when I'm out, I might talk to 25 people. And just nicely, passing the time, chat. They love it. And I believe I make people's days by showing an interest in them. I don't say, "Oh, they might be offended." It's all rubbish. Don't believe it. Well, political correctness is, in my estimation, one of the biggest inhibitors to the free expression of thought. I won't even go into its moronic sister, health and safety. We cannot rescue an old woman who's fallen down an escalator, say trained staff, because we haven't received people handling. So that's all right then. Drugs. The pharmaceutical industry has a lot to answer for when it comes to the ability and the desire to converse. 100 million people worldwide are on psychiatric drugs. In the UK, over 50 million prescriptions are given annually, mainly for depression. So we may dull the nervous system, but that cures nothing. Perhaps we need more education how to use these medications and their limitations. A friend told me of someone handing round Valium tablets at a funeral service to protect people from the effects of sorrow. My friend refused, saying that he wanted to grieve and he wanted to feel. Someone could be immensely gifted and talented and yet be described as schizophrenic because they don't fit in with normality and are in consequence prescribed medication. I wonder how the great artists of the past would have fared if they'd been subject to a similar medical system. We shouldn't forget fluoride, mercifully not used locally, an industrial waste which was given to the concentration camp inmates in Hitler's Germany to make them docile, and yet still used in water supplies in some parts of the world, and currently here, in toothpaste. with a warning in minute 4-point unreadable font to consult a doctor if you actually swallow it. It goes to the pineal gland and calcifies it, so it makes you less intuitive. Neither we should forget the mercury, so beloved of vaccine manufacturers, and the now admitted link between MMR vaccine and autism. Do your own research. I believe that the therapeutic value of conversation is grossly underestimated, and the therapeutic value of medication is vastly overestimated. Though everything has its place, and if used appropriately, medication can be the right approach in the short term. How far away are we from the principle of traditional Chinese medicine? Treat the person, not the disease. The me, me, me. We can call it the Miley Cyrus, Lady Gaga, or Justin Bieber syndrome. The world revolves around me, so there's no point in anything if I can't use it for self-advertisement and image. I am essentially a commoditor for sale to the highest bidder. This brings about a shallow and immature form of philosophy where security depends on the position or opinions of those around us. Dress to impress. The only thing that matters is my image. I will be whatever you want me to be. There is no higher life. I am the center of my universe. All those who do not serve my purpose of self-aggrandizement are discarded as irrelevant. I alter reality itself to suit my perception of it. I want it and I want it now. No time for contemplation, consultation, sleeping on it, or some such. This includes the audience. All, including the audience, are a slave of adulation, and the performers have to be more and more extreme to garner the attention they crave. I'm sure you all keep up with Justin Bieber, but just in case you don't, he had to strip down to his briefs to get the reaction he craved. No conversation is required. Mindless adulation takes its place, but it can never satisfy the deeper needs. Life is just one continuous selfie. Mobile phones. The public relations agency that coined the term smart in connection with meters or any other devices received a fee of £300,000. The thinking was that if you questioned smart, then you would be deemed unintelligent. Smart or not, mobile phones, wireless phones of any type emit what we call dirty radiation. It is too easy to blame the mobile phone itself for a decline in the art of conversation. In order to prove this case, we'd have to show that wherever mobile phones are used, community spirit and conversation declines. Mobile phones have been seized on in India and in parts of Africa as a method of paying bills and keeping traders in touch with the prices in the local market, with no noticeable decline in community spirit. Professor Leif Sandford at Sweden's prestigious Lund University said, voluntary exposure of the brain to microwaves from handheld mobile phones is the largest human biological experiment ever. He says that although the long-term effects have not been proven, and that it was possible that neurons could repair themselves, he believed that the sterility of brain neurons would be brought forward by 20 years. There are two levels at which mobile phones are dangerous. The first and perhaps more obvious way is that people, particularly youngsters, use the device reportedly up to 8 hours a day and rewire their brain, rather than face-to-face human contact. But the second level is more insidious. Radiation referred to above consists of what we call dirty electricity, and it's like a microwave oven, you see. And it can be up to, wait for it, 3 million times the background noise. 3 million. So when you start to call, you get a blast to your head. The radiations are at a level the brain can receive, and there is growing evidence that functionality is affected. I have here a meter, electrosmog meter, and it will tell me the microwatts per square meter. Watt is a unit of power, like the kettle. And if anyone wants to have a go, if anyone's got a mobile phone, put it next to the meter and see what happens when you call someone. You know, real offer. There it is. Have a go. Just press that to turn it on. And there we are. An analogy is that if we're listening to Mozart and a pneumatic drill is turned on, that you cannot appreciate the Mozart. Important. Even while the phone is not being used, it is still transmitting in order to maintain contact with the nearest base station. This it does every minute. That is why batteries run down. And the further you are from the relay station, the weaker the signal and the harder your phone has to work and the more it broadcasts. People tend to wear the phone there. Bad idea. This is particularly relevant in country areas where the signal is weak. It's even worse with decked phones, cordless phones at home. Designers have no worries about conserving battery charge. The signal will punch through walls if necessary, and if your head, between the phone and the base station, your head will be roasted. Decked phones are estimated to have 100 times the biological effect that an ordinary mobile has. We need to see all such instruments as small microwave ovens. Calls of even medium length heat up the skull by up to 1 degree centigrade. Who knew that? Well, you do now. Scientific American postulates that radiation can interfere with brain function. The effects are far worse with children as their skulls are thinner.
Are you talking about cordless phones?
Yes. Yes. Smart meters are even worse. They emit so much power, they even kill adjacent plants, and I hope we never get smart meters here. Quote, the smart meter, which we haven't heard yet, fingers crossed, is number one in terms of devastation to our nervous system. Devastation. The radiation permanently destroys and alters the manufacture of brain proteins, meaning that it completely changes the human organism permanently. And that's Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt, MD, PhD. Why is this important from the point of view of conversation? Let's say you're going to meet your friend for coffee to talk about some problem or another. You find you're not getting any meaningful feedback, although that friend is trying to be sympathetic. If they have been on a mobile phone previously, it's very likely that their brain is recovering from damage, and therefore they are only semi-coherent. Why don't we hear about these dangers? Pretty obvious, really. Follow the money. The newspapers are not going to write an excoriating article when the mobile phone companies spend a fortune on advertising. Suggestion. We might start to regard our mobile phone as for necessities only and use non-wireless landlines wherever possible. When we go for a walk, particularly in the country, we could turn off the phone altogether. If we do so, nobody will die. They can leave a message, which you will then see when you switch on. More heavy. Heaviest. It was John Oort who postulated the idea of dark matter in 1932. This theory came about because the movements of stars and planets could not be explained in terms of observable matter. The same is true in world politics. If something doesn't make sense, for example, if murderers get off scot-free or wars are declared for no apparent reason, then dark politics are in operation. A small example is the partial redaction of Tony Blair's conversation with George Bush, when the nature of their connivance had become obvious. So there are two streams of information running in parallel. One is for the general public, and the other about is what's actually going on. The governments and the corporations tell the media what they may or may not publish. And in recent years, media control has come under fewer and fewer more powerful entities. For example, in the US, there's 5 corporations. We, the public, are left with crumbs from the table and froth from the beer. Aldous Huxley, who published in 1931, and George Orwell, who published his seminal 1984, were neither clairvoyants nor prophets. Aldous Huxley was the secretary of the Fabian Society, the aim of which was to introduce worldwide socialism, and Huxley taught George Orwell French at Eton College. Huxley was in favor of the New World Order, which you may not have heard of, but Orwell wrote his 1984 as a warning. The plans to homogenize the world were well advanced, even in the 1920s. But one concrete example for this evening. 10 days after 9/11, General Wesley Clark. Mr. Page, honey, can I have your backup? No, it's all right. It's all right. It's all right. It's okay. Right, but one concrete example for this evening. 10 days after 9/11, General Wesley Clark was informed while visiting old colleagues that the US were planning to attack Iraq. On further inquiry, he was informed that the situation was even worse. 7 countries would be attacked over a period of 5 years, starting with Iraq, then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and then finishing off with Iran. This arose, so he was told by an aide, from discussions in the Pentagon starting 1991. Said the general on TV, "It's a tragedy how this has unfolded." Anyone can view this on YouTube by typing in his name. It's not secret. So if you didn't know about this particular dot connector, the current instability in the Middle East will make no sense, especially in view of today's news, by the way. Why should people suddenly rise up when they have a reasonable life? The idea of pre-planned wars may surprise some people, but when you consider that Freemason Alfred Pike wrote about the need for 3 world wars in 1871, this should come as no surprise. Just Google Albert Pike, Third World War. There it all is. Even the BBC has succumbed to international pressure to the extent that we don't know if it is independent news we're getting or recycled propaganda from elsewhere. Get a pro-fracking audience for question time? No problem, Mr. Cameron. Lest we become smug about other countries, our own historical record in the British Empire, including India, was not a shining example of democracy, to say the least. The effects on conversation. Continuous disinformation is felt at some level and causes mental disconnection. In the mind of the public, cynicism of government and politicians at an all-time high. You can't trust anybody. They're all in it for what they can get out of it. The world has gone mad, etc. Problem for conversation is this. As previously mentioned, disconnectedness in one area can lead to disconnectedness in another. And that may be why people are so apathetic about voting, save an issue of immediate importance, such as the Scottish yes or no vote. We might ask, what is the point in even talking about politics? Why indeed? Or reading about it? Would you sit down in a pub and speak with someone whose every other statement was a lie or a cover for a lie? So why are we reading the newspapers? And I met people who said, I haven't read a newspaper for months, and I don't notice that their intelligence has declined at all. And I think newspapers should carry a health warning. Most of this is not true. Only having half the jigsaw pieces does not help our cause for meaningful conversation, which requires sound basic data as a starting point. And I totally understand if people wanting to switch off from all these dreadful matters and not having anything to do with them. I would have thought you get more benefit by reading a good book, quite frankly. But the final one, nearly there, general psychological fear of the future. We all know that all is not well, but we cannot quite put our finger on it. In a way, we are aware of everything because we're on the same living, vibrant planet. We are all actually in touch, but that's another talk. This felt situation can cause the human spirit to batten down the hatches and go into self-protect mode. You say to yourself, is it me? Is it the world? Although the resulting worry and fear may have very little identifiable content, it befuddles the mind. Fearful people are more easily controlled. And don't forget the public enemy number 1, cortisol, produced by the body, which interferes with practically everything, including learning and memory. So that's a pretty ghastly and dismal list, so it does get better from now on. Helpful ideas. Then I'm going to have a pause. Distancing may be the answer. We could bear in mind that events are going on, but look at them through the wrong end of a telescope, because what we give energy to us controls us. There is another kind of brain adjustment that can be helpful. Some of you, old school, may remember the advice, be as innocent as doves and wise as serpents. This is a very clever analogy. The serpent is ground-based, streetwise, reptilian in every sense. The dove is white, has a neutral overview, and is a symbol of peace and freedom. We could parallel this with the reptilian mind and the neocortical mind. This process of existential placement, as the Daily Mirror would say, will be easier for those who practice meditation. In the words of St. Paul, being in the world but not of it. I like the way the analogy in the New Testament is so simple, but they're so clever. Philosophy could be another answer. We could acknowledge that we on planet Earth are having to learn some lessons the hard way, and we could play our part in maintaining consciousness by our words, thoughts, and deeds. Morality is a third answer. We could confirm that the loss of integrity on the planet is no reason for us to lose our personal integrity, and we can create our own personal power station of truth and integrity. Yes. Practically, we could seek to keep our community strong and seek ways of avoiding the systems such as money, which is contaminated, by engaging in exchange and barter, particularly of skills and experiences. So in other words, don't waste your time. All this stuff is going on. What about us? You know, let's try and live our lives to the best. I'll skip this bit. You know, the red pill and the white pill, the blue pill, sorry, in the matrix. So we've got a choice. If you don't do anything, by default, you go down the tubes. But you can have, if you take hold of yourself with discipline, and it really is hard work, I must admit, there's unlimited scope in serving other people and leaving a situation better than when we found it, as Socrates always tried to do. As we become freer, we have access to more and more creativity. So as you become free, you become free. It's exponential. We can be a shining example to other people, lightening up many individuals in the course of a day. My own philosophy is become a living art installation. My existential thought for the day is heavy stuff. The body is the vehicle, not the driver. Even heavier stuff. If we get married to our eternal self, nothing can get to us. Do you like that? I do. Summary. It doesn't take much to make a lethal cocktail to cause the death of the human being as a thinking entity. A little bit of fear of rejection, a little bit too much medication, a wireless router on all the time. This is the bonds I was talking about. Too much radiation by the mobile phone, an ongoing difference with the partner, dissatisfaction on work, and we are unknowingly robbed of the will to realize our intellectual and human potential. Human society may be damaged, but has it been destroyed beyond repair? Choice is ours. Pause. I want to carry on, but one or two people are dropping to sleep, so it's always a bad sign. I don't mind, actually. Can I carry on? Are you still up for it? What to do? This all gets better now. There's no more heavy stuff. Buckminster Fuller says, don't try to heal a broken system, create a new system that replaces it. Einstein, of course, a problem can only be solved at a different level to that which it was created by. Gandhi, the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. I love that one. Jason Leotosis, who's a Greek advocate, says, we are the midwives of ourselves and the future. So many of the dangers described above can be avoided by simply doing something about it. For example, not using your mobile phone close to your head. You can use wires. Other types of problem are much more difficult to solve on your own. If you try me versus the world, you will fail, which is the reason why so few New Year's resolutions are successful. For a structure to be effective, it needs to be the opposite to what caused the problem in the first place. For example, acid stomach. If we've done our homework thoroughly and we're sure the pain is due to acidity, then we can be sure that the remedy, alkaline will have the desired effect. That is why I've spent so much time this evening on analysis. And I would like a brief pause now because I'd like to talk about Bath, I'd like to talk about networking and what can be done. I just need to change my state of mind from the gloom and doom. So will you give me a couple of minutes? I've been involved with networking for many, many years, and London Village that I ran, an organisation in London, had 10,000 members. We had 200 events a month and as many again outside the programme. And I got very good at networking. And I'd like to talk about some of the features that I see as being part of a helpful network, especially bearing in mind Bath. Because Bath, I think, is an ideal place. It's not too big. I find Bristol a bit overwhelming, I must say. Midsummer Norton's a bit small, but we won't discuss that. Wells, I'm not sure. Frome is arty, but Bath I really love. And I come here, we come at least 2 or 3 times a week. We absolutely love it. Let's talk about getting people together. I don't use PowerPoint, by the way, for the very good reason that as soon as people see a screen, they go into watching TV mode and they immediately go passive. They never do PowerPoint unless you can help it, you know? So let's say, taking art, well, I picked art because I think it's a rather nice thing. So let's say this is the population, right? And these are the people who are interested in art, say 1 in 100 or something like that. The chances of meeting arty people are actually quite small. I'm not saying when you come here, but in the general course of life, it's unlikely. So getting people together obviously increases the chance of meeting such people. So the level of acuity would be, say, 10% normally. The level of acuity about art would be, say, 90%. That's very nice. The trouble is, what do you do then? There's 2 basic ways of going about meeting, organizing people together. One is the old-fashioned talk, where someone talks for 40 minutes, you know, the expert, you know. And you get 2 or 3 points that were interesting, and then time for questions. And then tea and coffee. Now, the speaker may or may not have been good, but the ability of the audience to network and share their knowledge has not been exploited, and so it's much more boring than it should be. And Francois and I go to many talks in the country. We are the youngest, by a long way sometimes, you know, a generation above who talks about the war. And I think this, no disrespect, and I think this is really not popular with young people. It doesn't do it for them. Now, young people go too far the other way. They meet for hanging out, and they have this always a green bottle of beer, I notice, small one, which they, you know, it's never cold enough and not very big, and £3.50 and so on. That doesn't work either because the focus is not there. So we're not very good at applying our imagination to social situations to get the most out of the huge amount of talent that exists in people. Just don't do it. It's pathetic. Too small to read, but I'll read it out anyway. What should a good network be like? And this applies actually to anyone who's starting anything, so it might be quite useful for you. It should be intuitive. It should be obvious to everyone how it works. If you can't get across the purpose of something in 10 seconds, it's too difficult. Go back to the drawing board and get it right. It should be plug and play, friendly to use, easy to use. People are not going to spend endless time trying to use a system. There should be relevant focus, and again, that's difficult. I talked to an art gallery, and they said, oh, once we had the idea of getting all the art gallery owners together. And I thought, why? You want to have a moan about clients or something. You need a happy mixture of people that do not do the same thing, but have the same interests. That's why I was interested in art, particularly. It must be politics-free. I could tell you so many stories about organizations that are destroyed in the moment of creation because people grab the power for themselves. I want to be on a committee, and they go off wavelength from the members. The members are left out there. They don't know what's going on. So the committee say, oh, we worked so hard. Well, yeah, but you didn't keep in touch, did you? You know, think of cellular growth. Think of the human body. You know, we're all members of one body. Remember that? Hopeless. And so they complain when people don't support them. They don't support them because they don't know what's going on. And actually, they don't agree with something, but they're never given a chance to say. So I think that all successful networks should be organic, should be anarchist. Anarchy doesn't mean fighting in the streets. It means there's no one above you and no one below you. If you can get that, everyone manifests and becomes more happy. And finally, this may sound strange to say, it should appeal to self-interest. Why is self-interest not selfish? Who's going to tell me? Come on, let's have some brains going. Why is self-interest not selfish? It does indeed. It certainly does. Everyone has a right to advance themselves and their intellect, their knowledge, their experience. That's called self-interest, not self-serving, self-interest. And the exciting thing about conversations is that when you speak to someone, they themselves become activated and excited. I went to a wonderful, what's it called? Preston. That's right, they had a wonderful weekend. Wonderful place. If the earth ends, that will be the last place to go because they're a family there, wonderful people. And I said to this John Dee, I think he was an artist, I said, sorry, a poet. I said to him, if you couldn't write but only draw, what artist would you be close to? And he was there for half a minute thinking about it. He said, that's a wonderful question. So by asking questions of people, you do them an enormous favor. So it's not selfish. Okay. So the real trick of this network lark is to not to be over-specialized, but not to be under-specialized. So if you try to serve everyone, you serve nobody. So you have to get the mesh of the fishing net just right to catch people. And I was hoping, I'm not sure what I'm going to do this evening about actually launching the network, but that's the idea. Do you like that? Do you understand what I'm saying? If you don't, say so. It's okay. Just a view. You know. But I've done rather a lot of this, and I've seen so many organizations. You walk in and oh, this is horrible. And the reason, oh, it's horrible, is that there's politics behind the scenes, and you can smile all you like, and if they're at each other's throats, no one wants to go anywhere near the place. You'll be happy. You know, happiness is good. Sorry. So, the key thing about networks, and this applies to you if you want to start one, it's not so much what you know, but who you know, and who knows you. So in other words, without trusting and caring, nothing will happen. So it's no good having a big PR launch, you know, with drinks and so on, and hire a band specially and so on, and we're launching this particular idea, because something can just evaporate in 10 seconds and people forget what they've even been. So the best ideas, so it takes time. The best ideas are the simplest. Human nature has this funny idea that you have to be complicated to be a success, and it's not true. The simplest ideas are the best. Now, I'm going to tell you what I was going to suggest, and I'm, again, not sure what I'm going to do. Not sure. Could be now, could be sometime. Let's say we gather X number of people who are interested in art. Just take art, any subject, start with art. Let's say that one of them is interested in René Magritte, someone in Picasso, and someone is an expert on Australian art galleries. Now, my proposal is that the membership is dependent upon, not money, forget about money, barter, good, money, bad. You'll never guess, I'm shocking, I'm interrupting myself now. You're familiar with the term national debt, aren't you, in a country, right? How long do you think it would take it takes the American economy to accumulate $1 million of extra debt? Have a guess. 2 minutes, 32 seconds. It can't go on. Very good, thank you. So my point is that there is such a stability in getting into this money thinking. I think if we can invest ourselves in caring for people, I think that's a much better bet, quite frankly. So anyway, back to this. So let's say person A is interested in René Magritte, person A in Paul Klee, Picasso, and so on. So the deal is this, that I say to the assembled crowd, I'm very happy to talk about my subject, which is René Magritte. But in return, if I'm interested in Turner, I would like to ask someone else, you see. So everyone puts their interest into the pot, you see. So you only talk about what you really enjoy doing. So if you were to imagine, so it's like a knowledge bank, you could say. If you imagine that instead of 5 people, you have 50 people or 500 people, you've got a huge bank of knowledge that could be drawn on. So the agreement is that you're willing to talk about something. Now, I would talk about, I don't know, Frida and Diego, for example. So I admire Frida very much. You know, she had the terrible, who knows about Frida? Yeah, she had this terrible accident at the age of 11. And she had such pain. And then she has her first exhibition. And she comes in a bed. That's wonderful, you know. And what do you think of someone who can design machine guns and yet paint The Last Supper? That's pretty good, isn't it? You know who that is? Yeah. So there's an amazing amount of role models in the artistic world that if we tap into it, we get elevated. And elevation is what we need, because the government ain't going to do it. Declaring war on Syria, God help us, you know. It made me sick to see these millennia-old buildings just reduced to dust, you know, because someone might be inside. So, you know, to go to that too much, it just does your head in. So I'd rather concentrate on what I can do something about, which is the quality of the relationships that we have and the elevation of the consciousness. And if you believe in spiritual stuff at all, you know that we're not our body, we're just the visitor to it, you know, da, da, da. So my plan was this. I say was because I'm not sure what we're going to do this evening. We'll have to talk about it. But the second idea was that a lot of us have experienced going to an art gallery. Sorry, mustn't move around too much. Everyone has 1 or 2 pieces of the jigsaw in, let us say, the world of art. So let's say I've been to Bristol. I've seen a wonderful exhibition, and you remember the one with the books? Did anyone go to that? With the books opening and closing in the library? That was wonderful. Now, what a good thing it would be if there could be an occasion when we could all swap information about this. And yesterday was a good day for me. We had this wonderful example, and I just want to test you on this. How many people have heard of the Somerset Art Weeks? Yes, that's 4, 5. Okay. Some of you don't. It's currently going on. There are 217 people who have offered their studio or their gallery to look around. Now, what I would do at such meetings is to say, hey guys, has anyone ever heard of this? So, no you haven't, but you know, everyone knows now because I've told you. Now just imagine everyone giving some information of value. What a splendid evening that would be. My client group in London was mainly the bedsitter brigade, and they were, let's say, looking for a company, looking for that right person, you know. But it's not the same in Bath, and you can hardly help bumping into people here. It's difficult to be lonely unless you put a paper bag on your head. My assumption is that people are busy, but they would turn out occasionally if the evening was going to be interesting and productive. I don't want to waste time. I'm too old for that. Too senior. The earth has gone around the sun too many times. So those 2 points were the main reason for having a network. I I'm quite happy to fund it myself. I quite enjoy it, actually. I like starting things. I've got a reverse psychology. If there's nothing to see, I get very excited and very secure. But once things are there, I lose interest a bit, you know. So the bigger the mountain, I like mountains, you know. And people saying it's impossible, well, they better not say that. Bad idea. Because I think the human spirit can do far more than we imagine. Now, what do you think of this, this idea? You say good, bad, no? You like it? Because I don't say just because it's me. I shan't be offended, you know. We can... I've got to be very careful when I say this. I mentioned on the leaflet, you can only launch a ship once and the water has to be deep. I'm willing to fund the whole thing, but I'm not willing to advertise in papers because that costs a lot. It's got to be a word of mouth thing. Do you think that is possible? Do you think we are quorate enough to spread something by word of mouth? If you don't, say no. Yes. It's very marginal, I'm afraid.